Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello. Apparently, I'm having issues with audio. Please let me know if you can hear me. Come on. Please let me know, creatives, community, and kind folks. Testing. Do I wear my headphones to um, I hear the echo of my voice and other sounds in my ears, so I can hear it. I didn't hear anything. Anyway, creatives, community, kind folks, welcome to RPG with DBJ. I'm your host, DBJ, and we're going to talk about Mega Dungeons. Now, before I start that, I want to read I normally don't do this in the beginning of the show, but I wanted to read a comment. And it is, since we are now getting, you guys, as my co hosts, are now getting back into the swing of um, our daily RPG talks and whatnot. Yeah, and it's been a while since the channel's been dead over a year now. But I really want to get back into our daily talks, just having some fun, just being able to have some honest discourse. And someone, Dojo Breaker, made a rather sizable, large comment. But I wanted to read this comment because this individual disagreed with what I had to say, and I think that's perfect. On this corner of the interwebs, this is where we can have honest, open um, disagreements without this pervasive instant hate because someone doesn't agree with you. So I wanted to read this comment and give them a little bit of a shout out and see if you guys agree, as we have been talking about Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, open licenses, um, system reference documents, and that kind of thing. Today, we're not going to do that, but I just want to read this comment because I love the fact that not only did this person disagree, but they were respectful. They had their idea well thought out. I'm sure they weren't able to participate live, and even if you are able to participate live, it's difficult to get this kind of thought out just using a chat feature. So here we go. This is from Dojo Breaker. Quote, I recommend the book Mine about how ownership has a narrative quality. Remember, we're talking about business in the RPG community and especially about WotC. And yet it is 90% of the law, how the narrative of ownership shifts to benefit corporations more and more. There's actually an example of what you mentioned in terms of yard, where someone's private land was used by everyone in the neighborhood to get around, but one day they decide to not allow this and it becomes a court battle. I do want to correct you on account of businesses. Most people don't know this, but most businesses in the world are family owned, including corporations. This sounds very aristocratic because it is, but it does have a benefit. It means that the stakeholders in the company have a motive that is something other than profit. If you've seen The Godfather, you can see that not everything is about making money. It's about the family. The tragedy of The Godfather is that an honest business falls into the hands of a cutthroat without the heart of the former sovereign. The most important thing about a business is what it's not. It's not a charity. They can't keep giving things away. We see similar things happen in corporations with shifts in power. In the book, The Dictator's Handbook, we see how corporate leaders can maneuver themselves into a position of absolute power using the myth of capitalism. They position themselves as being the most capable of generating dollars for the company, but in reality, they are the ones with the political clout to satisfy the key stakeholders to let them have power. It goes from we're not a charity to it only matters if it makes all the money because us thinking we are making good money decisions is what keeps me in power. And now the only motivational factor is to keep board members' seats warm. Yeah, that's an issue too, right? Sorry. Anyway, continuing on. That said, I do think Wizards of the Coast is within its legal rights to set more limits on how their open license is used. However, I think that we have to be careful not to instinctively back off and say, of course they're allowed to, which was my position. I added that part in. WotC didn't build D&D in a vacuum. It put together mechanics that were inspired by other games and were refined over many years. In fact, one of my biggest gripes with the company is that being a DM has more and more become a job under WotC's leadership than a hobby. I have the same complaint about Paizo, by the way. It's part of the myth that WotC has perpetuated and made no attempt to dissuade that you can use their system for any kind of story. And implicitly, if you can't, it's a skill issue. So no, I don't think they have the right of this at all. If they're going out of their way to give the appearance that their system is setting agnostic when it's not, if they're going out of their way to depend on DMs to make the system work for things it can't work for as they have, I don't think that they are in their rights or in their right mind. I agree with that too. The OGL is the basis for D&D's myth as the foundational game for the TTRPG community. Not basic role playing by Chaosium, not GURPS, D&D. If D&D wants to not be treated as a generic system, they need to start marketing their system as something proprietary and specific for a certain brand of settings, and they should have done so ages ago. They made it so that their system and settings appear to have no brand identity to market to more people. So I wanted to read that out because this is an example of someone who has a particular position. And while how do I say this? While I disagree, actually I agree with it, right? I think everyone's opinion matters, and no matter what your opinion is, if you have one, then your opinion does matter. And that means how many people now are like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to continue to play 5e. Or there's some who've been out of the system and going like, you know what? I don't think I even want to be part of this. I don't even want to. I Some people don't even want to be part of the conversation because they're like, why are we even having this conversation, right? And I think all of that matters. So let's do a hard segue into mega dungeons, and this will have something to do with business at the end of this. But I did want to come back to the fact that I wanted to start the channel back up and have conversations with you guys because of the Dungeon 23 challenge that's been out there. We're not going to go into the history of it, but essentially the Dungeon 23 challenge is the idea that excuse me. Um, hmm. Is there static or something in the background? Yeah, it very well could be that my microphone is picking up a lot of conflict. Sorry about that, guys. It's difficult for me to fix it. Oh, I see what it. My microphone's picking up my tray, and I'm a nervous Nelly. I'd rather stand up and move around and stuff. I hate sitting down. Anyway, um, I'll stop. There we go. Hands in firmly in lap. All right, so one of the things I love about this Dungeon 23 challenge is the fact that it's not really about the challenge. It's about trying to be creative every day or every week or something for an entire year. Draw one room a day, 365 days, and at the end you have a mega dungeon with 365 rooms and something to show for it. But essentially, the challenge isn't about designing a mega dungeon. The challenge is about being creative and spontaneous and exercising the muscle of creative thought every day, including if you just make an empty room. But here's the issue: mega dungeons aren't a thing anymore, are they? And there's a lot of hate for mega dungeons. It's just the idea, once the challenge was placed in front of people, there's a lot of people in the community that are going like, mega dungeons, they're stupid. What's the point of a mega dungeon? Mega dungeons don't make any sense. It's random rooms. Most of the rooms are going to be empty and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of wanted to take the myth of the mega dungeon and resuscitate the idea of a mega dungeon when a lot of story gaming and narrative gaming has kind of dominated the field rather than emergent storytelling. So anyway, let me read some comments here for some of our co-hosts, and then get into why the hate, where the hate's coming from, establish some kind of like baseline, and then tell you guys like how I would correct that hate. All right. Mm, mm, mm. All right, Mike says, as someone who's been in the printing industry for 36 years, all under four different family owned companies, I completely disagree on the motivations of the owners. Yeah, Mike's got some deeper issues with that, and I definitely agree. He's got a lot of experience with that I think goes far and beyond a simple comment. Anyway, yeah, money, money, money. It's like working for hegemony. The power lay with a few who perpetuate their power through nepotism and a tight fist on profit. And we're seeing that full force now. Yeah. Anyway, Zamara says, doesn't mean I don't see its purpose, but its high power fantasy isn't how I tell my stories until you earn that high power fantasy. Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons has never made it clear how the hero to zero system works, and we'll get into that and when it how it affects mega dungeons as well. Yeah, Mike says mega dungeons are a massive part of the OSR. I agree. Deadman continues to says most mega dungeons today are worlds with a bit of dungeoneering. I agree with that. Um, Yeah, and Wayne says, and thank you, Wayne, for a ton of your compliments, by the way, behind the scenes. Anyway, Wayne says 5e doesn't have to be run as high power fantasy. A DM can and should create the setting and know how to make it feel as they intend. Mm-mm-mm. So, okay, mega dungeons, and I'm going to put out a lot of the knee jerk reaction to mega dungeons and some of the myths associated with that. So one of the first myths of mega dungeoneering is it's just a bunch of random rooms and it doesn't make sense. I would say that uh, mega dungeons are much like shopping malls in the sense that yes, a large part of it doesn't make sense simply because of the visual appeal of a mega dungeon. You have graph paper. It's most of us do not have any ability to make isometric maps on the fly, and so by limiting remember the old classic light blue graph paper, and I remember buying packs and packs of that at Staples and Office Max and whatnot. But we are limited by the visual medium to display a mega dungeon. So while it seems like a mega dungeon has why is one level above a second level and you keep going down, simply I think it's just a matter of the materials that we're using, right? A mega dungeon doesn't need to be level one above level two above level three. I think there's one out there called Barrow Maze that's considered a single level dungeon. It's more lateral, horizontal than it is vertical or descending. No, a mega dungeon doesn't need to have that shape at all. Uh, Mega dungeons don't need to be attached to each other, as is taking part in the what was their YouTube channel Bandits Keep. He's going into Hex 23, and there's City 23. Deadman talks about Tower 23. No, they don't need to be one level over the other. It just so happens that having a map where you have stairs and slides and pits and shafts, and you can use graph paper design one over the other, it just makes a lot more sense physically in terms of the medium. Uh, mm, mm, mm. Let's see. Rickard says, I'll challenge this right out the gate. What even is a dungeon and what is a room? Exactly. I think some of the words, the nomenclature we use, people get caught up far too heavily in semantics. Like what's an encounter, and most people default encounter to combat encounter. They think that here's the second part. Mega dungeons are just one combat after another. What's the point? Well, no, mega dungeons are far more about exploration than anything. And that means physically, intellectually, and socially overcoming obstacles. So those obstacles could be getting past pits, climbing, jumping, lifting, moving, the physical parts of exploration. I've only got 50 feet of rope, and the pit is 100 feet. How do we get to the bottom? How do we climb up a shaft? It maybe there's a narrow ledge. There's flooding. There's lava and fire spewing out of place. There's tons of traps. Mega dungeons, the mechanics of the game, the squares, the shapes, the movement, the area effects of spells, a lot of those things were created. The gelatinous cube were created literally for mega dungeons or for dungeoneering itself. And the fact of what is a room, uh, I always I've always contended that outdoor exploration is just a dungeon without a roof on it, and instead of being separated by walls, it's separated by the physical nature of the land you're in. Maybe a river, a cliffside, dense foliage would just be the walls that would be in a mega dungeon. So no, a dungeon does not need to be underground. It can be the word dungeon can mean anything that you want. A mega city, a thick forest, and it has glens in it, open spaces, and those are your rooms. Whether it's a an expansive desert, and the accursed desert has these oases and other places out there, crypts and things, and each of them can be rooms in your dungeon. So I absolutely agree with you there, Ricker. Ooh, all right, co-host, don't go too fast. Um, Mike says, hell, I regularly run one mega dungeon that has special gravity where each wall has its own gravity. All right, MC Escher. Ooh, need a cough button. Um, Going up or down to another room is subjective. It's literally a far realm craft. Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's very much George Perez used to draw in the comic books Olympus like an MC Escher painting, and the gods of Olympus. This is for the Wonder Woman comic, and the gods of Olympus would be sitting on the walls and stairs that would go into nowhere, and they would be upside down and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah. Deadman says world's biggest mall is the Dubai Mall at over 12 million square feet. You know what? I was gonna wait for the end of this, but I'm gonna share for you share for you a Twitter post, and it's pretty hilarious. So someone decided to, let's see if we can. Oops, let's go up here. There we go. There we go. Let me share this with you. So someone decided to share this Twitter post, and it says if you ever have to completely improvise a mega dungeon for some reason, may God have mercy. Find a map of a large asymmetric shopping mall, preferably with multiple levels for the layout. And below that, it says find the directory and use individual stores as loose prompts off of which to riff. American Eagle, which is a brand, maybe the nest of an imperialistic bird folk. Hot Topic, which is another store, a cult popular with the youth in a nearby village. Goes on to say in a Twitter post, consider history and factions throughout play, jotting down thoughts, especially thoughts from your players. After the first session, you can ossify these loose connections with something solid enough for long-term play. And this person, oh, the poster was Prismatic Wasteland at Prismatic Waste, and goes on and ends it with, I don't necessarily recommend improvising a whole mega dungeon, but if you simply must, a mall isn't a bad place to start. And I think that's kind of cool. I don't know. It just there was someone else I was listening to. Oh, Kiln. I'm so sorry. I can't remember their YouTube channel, but was talking about using um, designing adventures and campaigns around um, um, oh, my brain's going around like Disney World and Six Flags Great Adventure, Hershey Park, um, designing them around like these amusement parks in the sense of how they are designed as a spoke, and each part of the park is its own adventure of sorts. And I was like, that sounds really cool. Yeah, Mike says a briar maze could be a dungeon. The definition is flexible. Exactly. I don't know. Yeah, Z says I might. It might just come from I missed the beginning. Speaking on topic and back to true form of my long messages, it makes sense that there's a bit of hate or distrust. Might be a better phrasing. It might just come from the fact that we have a hard shift to heavy narrative gameplay, focusing more on characters than locations. I definitely agree. I think um, oh, sorry. Z continues to say the this pushes the creation of dungeons and places in general to an overkill since you need more NPCs than dungeons. Yes, you do need a lot of NPCs. So anyway, um, one of the things that has fallen by the wayside, and it's been an unintended consequence of narrative gameplay rather than locational gameplay, has been that now it's more about character focus and generating a story as opposed to emergent storytelling. And emergent storytelling is essentially we don't have a plot, the characters just go into a location, and what happens is a story is generated out of it. And one of the myths and hate about mega dungeons is there's no story, there's no plot. You're just expected to have player characters enter into a location and do a thing, and there's no reason for them to be there. Let me stop for just a minute. I do have to clear my throat. I'm sorry. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, so there is a little bit of, I will admit that this is a huge problem, and mainly because much like a sandbox world where you expect your players to have a hand in where the story goes, dungeoneering and mega dungeoneering means that the players need to be motivated and need to be active rather than reactive. Reactive play is players are minding their business in tavern, and great evil happens outside the door, maybe even affecting them directly, and then they get involved. When it comes to going into a mega dungeon, the dungeon exists. The players want to go into that location to delve into it, to explore. And a lot of times the reasoning for that in the OSR has been treasure. Treasure is experience points. You want experience points, you want treasure. But a lot of times they're not explaining in the OSR community why it is that they even want treasure in the first place. And it's not mercenary. Normally, treasure hunting has been like, well, it's because my character is greedy, and we want to make characters that aren't greedy. They have a purpose. It's because they're noble. They want revenge. They have unresolved issues. They're loyal to their cousin who's going on adventure. It's not about the money. Unfortunately, like today, we don't have name levels anymore. So back in the day in OSR, between say 8th to 11th level, various character classes would reach name level, which means that you weren't a druid, you weren't a ranger, you weren't a fighter, you weren't a monk or a wizard until you got to name level. So each level, level one through two, through all the way through ninth level, you had a title, and then you tried to reach name level. And all the characters in the party were attempting to get treasure, not because they were greedy, but to accomplish a goal based on their character. So if you were a fighter, you wanted to establish a stronghold. If you were a cleric, you wanted to establish a religious center like a church or a synagogue or a cathedral. If you were a thief at the time, before rogues, you were thieves. If you were a thief, you wanted to establish a thieves guild, or dominion over a city of some sort. If you were a monk, you want to establish a monastery and so on. And so the idea was you needed cash. Even if you were a ranger or druid, you wanted to have enough money to, say, keep people away from your land. So you had enough cash to buy them off and go, leave me alone. This land is going to be undeveloped. Or if you were a ranger, I'm going to be a warden or protectorate of this particular all this land here, and we're not going to develop it at all. And here's some cash for people who want to join me and eventually establish a stronghold. And so characters would semi-retire midway to 20th level, and that was what the cash was for, what the treasure was for. Mike says, who says a dungeon can't be character focused? Player legacies or backstories could be inserted, absolutely. Adding factions and rivalries in a dungeon creates political plots, RP chances, and narrative points. And to move on from that, maybe there's a relative, friend, loved one, comrade that was lost? How many adventures start with random individuals explore some place and have never come back? Or maybe one of them has come back, or one of them has sent a message in a bottle that mentions a specific character's name, and in that effect, now they have a personal reason to go into the crypt to excise the soul of their ancestor or something like that. So yes, you can make it personal. It doesn't take that much effort to do so, but he can make it personal. Absolutely. JP says uh, passive players usually want a story to be involved with. At arm, oop, it moved a little bit. At arm's length, engaged players want to be engrossed in the world and be entirely hands-on with the game. Absolutely. Another part of mega dungeoneering is knowledge. It is uncovering facts. We all know that, say, hydras and trolls do not heal because of fire and acid. The only way players found that out was either the hard way, they got their asses kicked and realized fire and acid is the thing that keeps them from regenerating, or they learned that through sages. They learned that in the dungeon. When you're dungeoneering, and we're going to get to empty rooms in a minute. When you're dungeoneering and you go into an empty room and you see claw marks and blood and burn marks and scratches on the floor and all of those things gave you knowledge about further things in the dungeon. If you see a bunch of realistic looking strange statues in odd positions of horror, some of them destroyed, you go, oh, is it a Medusa or is it a basilisk? And the next time they turn the corner, they fight the basilisk. Maybe they lose a player character or two, and now they've learned something. And so throughout mega dungeoneering, it's about learning new things about the game, about enemies, about the tactics that are used by a lot of these enemies, and it's about learning about dealing with factions. We're going to get into factions as well. So yeah, a lot of dungeoneering, the reward of it was learning new things, because back in the OSR time, you had a big giant book of monsters and we didn't know every monster. Today, click of a couple of buttons, you could find out everything about monster stats and stat blocks. But at the time, you didn't know, that ghouls had like diseased poisonous fingers, they would paralyze you. And that ghouls ate the dead, and rust monsters rusted out. You didn't know these things until you either were foolish and you just ran headlong into things. Plus, characters were so fragile, you always wanted a reason to navigate away from a brutal conflict. So you wanted to find things like secret passages to get around the bad guys, to uncover traps and use the traps to lead enemies into those traps, or use keys within the mega dungeons. We'll talk about keys as well, to flip keys to block off certain areas of the dungeon so they wouldn't affect another area, or wiping out an enemy and getting allies and things like that. So Rickard mentions you can have a mega dungeon that is one long big plot line. If you think about it, the Diablo series of games are just one big mega dungeon with an overarching plot, and even level plots. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Mike says a dungeon could have kidnapped PC relatives or contain a cure for a PC's loved one who suffered an affliction. Absolutely. A dungeon could contain an item needed to overcome a demon. It can have a story and more motivations than money. Absolutely. There's a number of mega dungeons where it's the we wandered inside and then the door closes behind us. There's no way back out. The only way is forward. There's a plenty of convenient mega dungeons that do that. Hey, let's go into a weird cave where I see a strange light, and then the other player character's like, "Don't go in there, halfling buddy." Halfling gets sucked in. Everybody gets sucked in, and they go, "Well, how do we get out of this?" Like the original Dungeons and Dragons animated cartoon series in the 80s, right? How do we get out of this? I guess we're just going to have to keep adventuring and whatnot. Jared says treasure, traps, monsters, puzzles, and mysteries that generated violent encounters, sudden turnabouts, revelations of secrets, or windfalls of sweet, sweet cash. Absolutely. The other thing was an unintended consequence of 5th edition. When I say 5th edition, I'm talking about every edition that led up to it. We see a lot more easy buttons. perception checks, light spells being common, a lot of food being common, never getting lost being common, a number of these things where they have an unintended consequence. And one of the unintended consequences is there's a lot more emphasis on player character capabilities that have nothing to do with treasure. Treasure has taken a back seat. Most player characters now are inundated with magic. Every level they go up, they have some other pseudo magical ability to allow them to navigate through some kind of difficulty or hazard or obstacle or combat. And that unintended consequence made the magic items that were classic in the OSR, and they still exist now, fall to the wayside. And a lot of those magic items had abilities that didn't quite have any game mechanics. It was like, I have a robe of pockets, and if I pull something out of this pocket, it's a ladder. There were a lot of one-shot magic items. There were a lot of strange magic items that were just like, it's a rope that extends for no apparent reason. One of my favorite magic items was I don't remember the name of it. You guys remember the name of it, though. I'm sure you put it in the chat. It's a rod that, upon command, the rod cannot be moved. You could throw it in the air, and it would just. And once you gave the command or hold it in the air in a spot, once you let go of the rod, it could not be moved whatsoever. So you had two words to activate and deactivate it, and the rule for that magic item wasn't a rule at all. It was a rod that could not be moved, pushed at all, ever. And what a great way to like use a tool. A lot of these magic items were just tools to navigate through these dungeons, and you didn't know what was coming up. You didn't know. You kept a flask of water breathing. You kept a flask of protection against acid. You kept these strange, weird, magical items that had these strange effects because you weren't sure later on in the dungeon what would happen. And what would happen is there would be a churn of these items. You'd pull the thing off the robe, and you'd get the ladder. You use the ladder to climb out the pit. Okay, that's done. But then you get a bag of beans, and the beans would have, you'd throw it down. Was Qual's feather token was another one. A feather token tree. You take the feather, throw it down, and a tree would grow. Maybe you would climb it. Maybe you cut it down and use it for wood. Maybe use it to block a dungeon room. It was all these strange things. And by mitigating those and having player character capabilities, it became easier to navigate past physical obstacles in the dungeon, and sometimes even social ones. Oh man, let's get to our co-host here. Jared says, engaged players make the narrative themselves as they vocalize their theories, test their assumptions, and then excitedly or terrifyingly approach or run away from rooms. There's a reason. There's a reason why analysis paralysis happened whenever the player characters would come against the door, because they listen to the door, try to look under the door, what's on the other side of the door, how do we open up the door, all this kind of stuff. It's pretty funny. So here's another thing. A mega dungeon with empty rooms. So this Dungeon 23 challenge, and of course it can expand to other things. The idea is that if you don't have an idea for day number 47, you write down empty room. Let me just tell you that the word empty room, just like the word dungeon, just like the word room, don't get caught up in semantics. And there's no such thing as an empty room in a mega dungeon. Yes, there may not be anything in it, but more likely than not, empty rooms in mega dungeons are never empty. The word empty and room are never associated with each other, and neither are they have an association with themselves. Empty never means empty. An empty room. Okay, first of all, the word empty is a placeholder for lore, clues, objects, knowledge in the dungeon that leads you towards other things. So an example would be, while you might write down empty room, instead, empty rooms are places to explain why the mega dungeon exists in the first place. So most people hate mega dungeons because they're like, the ecology doesn't matter. You can't have a place filled with 10,000 odd creatures together. It doesn't make any sense. So an empty room might be a place for waste. So they throw all their waste products in there. It might be a place where they bury their dead. It may be a warehousing for food or extra equipment. Those kobolds that have all those traps, maybe these are extra pieces for it. There could be a forge that might be cold, or it might be working but no one's in there. It may be a dungeon literally with chains against the wall, or sacrificial, a place to sacrifice for with a pentagram and an evil deity or demon or something. An empty room is never empty. It has clues. For example, I remember being in a game where we were in a desert, and we there was a sandstorm, and we took cover in a hole in the ground, and which was basically a maze of sorts, and we knew it was dug by some kind of subterranean creature, but it wasn't around, and we found a pit, and we looked in the pit, and we wanted to find in a pit, and come to find out, all the pit was a place for this subterranean digging monster to defecate. Now there were things down in there like half chunks of dead bodies, and some items down in there and equipment and things like that, but like a place for waste, and maybe there's a place where they have cooking or fire or entertainment or what have you. An empty room is never empty. It is a clue for further exploration of this world. Maybe it's where the ogres keep all the stolen mead that they take from the dwarves, because dwarves make the best alcohol or something. That's what it's for. Um, mm, mm, mm. You guys are funny. Sorry, just looking at looking at our clues talking with each other. Also, one thing people hate about mega dungeons is that you don't there's no space for creativity for the dungeon master. So the dungeon master has a mega dungeon in front of them, and all they are just checkboxing, like a video game. Oh, they went to room number 23. All right, roll some dice. There are three gargoyles. Roll initiative. Okay, you killed the three gargoyles. Now you're going to room 87. Great. My notes say it's a Remoraz and two Bahirs. I don't know if any of you remember those monsters. Anyway, but no, 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 no. A mega dungeon is like sword of the sword of Damocles. It is a giant sword held by a thread above the players' heads, and they can sit on that throne, but eventually that sword's going to pop. That thread's going to pop, and the sword's going to come down on their head. In other words, what I mean, Wayne's, hey, you and I, we got the same age, dude. So what Wayne is saying, I do remember those monsters. The point of it is that when the players enter the dungeon, it gets foobarred. Your whole mega dungeon is foobarred the minute they go into the front door. It is effed up beyond all recognition. The, uh, a mega dungeon is a sandbox. It is kids opening presents on Christmas Day, and they're ripping the box open. They're taking the toy and smashing against the wall. They're jumping into the box and getting rid of the toys. They're crying. They're running around with joy. A mega dungeon is in a state of stasis, and it's held by a thread, and the player characters come in. So let me give you an example. First level of the mega dungeon, you've got kobolds, and they outnumber troglodytes 5 to 1. The problem is the troglodytes are powerful. So what did the kobolds do? The kobolds made traps all around the outside of their little fiefdom down in the dungeon. Let's go with classic caves and dungeons, right? So there you've got a faction of kobolds, and you have a faction of troglodytes. When the players go down into the dungeon, and usually there's more than one entranceway to the dungeon. Player characters come upon traps, they disable the traps, they come out of another trap, disable the trap, they find kobolds, they slay kobolds one by one. Guess what? Troglodytes now have an in to go into the troglodyte region. Guess now the player characters are taking this living dungeon and moving it around. What happens? Troglodytes area of influence starts to spread. Maybe they start killing kobolds behind the player characters. The kobolds may beseech the player characters, please don't kill us. Here's some random magic items if you stop the troglodytes. Player characters go, Troglo, what? I don't see any turn around and they go, oh, I didn't know that. That's what that stinky stuff was, right? Okay, so you have factions. Once the player characters get involved in a mega dungeon, that's when you, as the dungeon master, go, you know what? This is like the 37th dead body they just left in the hallways. I bet scavengers are going to probably come in here. I bet there's going to be maggots and rot grubs and carrion crawlers and ghouls and oh, that undead curse that has undead down in a third level that has nothing to do with the first level. Maybe it starts to sprint and starts animating all these dead bodies behind the player characters, right? So a double M Michael Marin says less like a mega dungeon, more like a war zone with a ceiling. Yes. Hey, what a great thank you for the idea. What a great mega dungeon to make a mega dungeon a war zone, right? So it's a mega dungeon without a ceiling that literally is a war zone. You've got siege engines, you've got mega machines, you've got troops, covering land. I'm thinking, and we're thinking fantasy here. Maybe it's like World War One. You've got trench warfare. You've got random arrows flying overhead, and players have to dodge out of the way. You've got smoking pits of some kind of noxious fumes. You've got barbed wire type of defenses, and player characters trying to navigate. As a I think a war zone as a mega dungeon would be awesome because you would have a plot. You would have it plotted out. The minute the player characters get involved, it gets foobarred. Everything starts to change. So when player characters are having battles in a mega dungeon, it alerts noise. I don't know if any of you remember, but there's a small little in fifth edition. It's called an obstacle. Back in the day, it was actually listed as a creature. There's a mushroom called a shrieker. There's a reason why shriekers existed. And we're going to get into random encounters now. So, and random encounters, chances, random encounter tables, and why they exist. Um, like Mike Mayer says, yeah, refugees, spies, fortifications. Players could use and abuse them. NPCs and monsters could use and abuse those refugees, spies, fortifications, navigating around the player characters. So again, with the player characters getting into the mega dungeon, this living thing. Sure, before the player characters get there, you have a standard map, you have things laid out, but the minute the player characters get involved and start making noise, battle brings noise. If we ever remember when we saw the Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and they slam the door shut and they're like, cave troll, slamming the door, it's because of noise. Remember dropping the thing down into the well and going, you mother hobbits, damn. Can't you pass? I thought you guys were supposed to have a great stealth score, right? And the idea is that they start having battles, it's going to draw the attention of other things in a dungeon. Now, it doesn't mean that there's going to always be reinforcements. Maybe those, when the players do battle with the troglodytes, the kobolds spies start looking around. They don't have to fight at all. They can just start spying on the PCs and going, what are they doing? Oh, they're getting rid of troglodytes. Hey, let's go back and make an offer. Maybe they get rid of troglodytes and we can extend our little fiefdom around, and or player characters go by and the kobolds are like, ooh, remember all those traps we had set open? We need to start activating all of our traps and set them up because these PCs are powerful, right? So a lot of these things can start happening in the dungeon that start drawing attention. And this is where you have faction play. The wizard sends its gargoyle slaves from level 5 up to level 3 where the player characters are at to make a deal or beseech them or lead them away or something like that. And over time, the player characters gain more knowledge. They start making deals with some of the factions. And remember, this isn't a charisma roll and it's permanent. This is a temporary alliance. Just don't stab us in the back. And the troglodytes are, we're not going to stab you in the back, but it doesn't mean we're not going to feast on some of these things that you're leaving around. Or it doesn't mean that the next highest bidder, that wizard down in level 5 or 8 or whatever, sends a message up to us and goes, oh, should we close off where they're going? Okay, so now let's get into keys. One of the great things about video gaming is that a lot of video games that are, I'm going to say mega dungeon based that you go through, you end up having a key. Sometimes that key is physical. You grab I'm going to hold this up. It's like it's a little It's a key that you find. You don't know when you're going to use it. It's a red key. You move around the dungeon, especially in sci-fi games, video gaming. You move around and you get to a door, and it is a red coded door. I've got a red key. I get to open that door. Oh, it's a blue door. I don't have a blue key. Now I need to go through the red door to go into there, to go find a blue key, to come back out, to go to the blue door, etc. Right? Now, you could literally have air quotes keys, but sometimes a key is a powerful magic item you find that you have to use, which destroys the magic item or sends the magic item back to the room you got it from, that opens up another place or closes off a place somewhere else in the dungeon, shifting the dungeon around. Sometimes that key floods an area. Sometimes that key makes the lava that was held back, that was fueling the magical forge or something, forcing the lava down into the dungeon. Maybe it shuts off an area and now there's no oxygen, or whatever. Maybe there's something that shifts the dungeon around. And sometimes those keys could be keys to new levels, a key to get you from, and when I say a key, secret doors, concealed doors, backroom passages. It is sometimes these things are rewards. No, do the heavily armed, heavily armored characters want to go through the 8 rooms, which at a minimum have waist level water? Sometimes we got to swim to another area, and they go, you know what? If there's a back way to get around here, maybe that's better. And sometimes that's the reward itself. Maybe there's a powerful monster chained up in front of an iron grate, and you have to go around this powerful monster, let's say the Hydra again. And you're like, man, it's got 8 heads because it's our fault because we didn't realize we needed acid. Now we can't get past the Hydra. What are we going to do? Oh, we found a key that pulls the chain back on the Hydra's chest or neck, that pulls it against the wall, and we can easily sneak by or something. Zamara says, going back to our co-host here, Zamara says, oh, I used to use them as ways to throw off enemies coming from behind us and throw off patrols. I'm thinking, talking about dead bodies, traps that have been reset, things of that nature. Heck, player characters leaving food behind, using illusions to make enemies run from it. I'm going to make an illusion of a brick wall, and the enemies go down a different pathway or something. Samara even continues and says, or the troglodytes realize the players are the greater evil and team up with the kobolds to eliminate the bigger threat. Hells yes. You can get factions that, when the player characters are cruel, greedy, evil, ignore knowledge in front of them, they could make factions team up together that were less powerful individually because they were so concerned. Meaning, like, what if the troglodytes and kobolds had scouts everywhere, right? They have scouts all around the dungeon. Now they bring those scouts inwards, and now they're like 80 strong kobolds, 30 strong troglodytes, all coming after the PCs, when it only would have been like 4 or 5, because they're worried about other things. They're hunting, they're gathering, things of that nature. Zamara continues and says, types of keys: knowledge of how to pass, an item that gives you access, NPCs to help you overcome. Exactly. Maybe there's an NPC that's like, I've been down in a dungeon, I've heard this conversations. They give you some of that knowledge, and the NPC is like, I am the hell out of here. I told you how to get past the Hydra. I'm gone. Just give me some food and I'm out of here. Maybe they come upon one of the, I don't want to say strange things, but one part of play is player characters making deals with evil monsters. First of all, those evil monsters want to stay alive, right? And their goals might be very simple. We want to live. We want to eat. We want to be left alone. So a temporary alliance may not be in one situation, it may not be a problem. Kobolds just want to be left alone. So player characters get rid of troglodytes. Kobolds say, you can pass by our 8 traps. They let the players go past those 8 traps. They reset all those traps back in and go, cross their fingers, please don't let them come back this way, right? That's not a permanent alliance. It is an alliance of convenience for this one thing. Eliminated troglodytes, got down to the next level, etc. Now, another, I'm going to say, hatred of mega dungeons is the idea of levels. Now, yes, it is gamist to say level 1 is for level 1 play. Level 2 is when you get to second level. Third level is when you get to third level. But let me give you a real world example of this. In the military, we know we have newbies, privates, recruits in the military. And we know those individuals are different than career military people. We know those career officers in the military are different than soldiers that have been in the field, that have been battle hardened. We know those soldiers are different than special forces, elite level special forces. We also know that they're different than intelligence gatherers. Player characters are professionals in what they do. Even if by accident they used to be a farmer, now they're second level, they know A, they should have the knowledge that A, they're coming upon enemies that they know they can confront. Giant rats, kobolds, goblins, first, second, third level enemies. Maybe an ogre or two. Ooh, it's a troll. Ooh, we've got some trouble now. They also should know, and you should give them hints, foreshadowing. Here's a great way of foreshadowing that I use. Your character knows blank blank blank. Your character is aware blank blank blank. Your character, in the past, your character has come upon, your character has experience with, your character has studied, right? And then fill in the blank. You know what that is? That's called passive skill use. You don't have to say passive perception. You don't have to say passive knowledge. You just say, "Hey fighter, you know what? You've been in enough battles. You know that these goblins were all cut down by the same warrior with the same extra sharp blade. You know that, right? Your character knows that this wasn't a wolf that took them apart. This was a huge beast, and it wasn't just a regular animal. It left dead bodies behind. It's got an evil to it. It didn't just consume them and run off. It left dead bodies for a reason." Okay, Zamara says, "Now I will say that the downside of dungeons is the biggest downside of being a GM and of running like original or old school or AD&D sandboxes. You need to keep very detailed notes of sessions half the time. Things change hard." Yeah, note keeping, and this is why one of the hatreds of mega dungeons saying there's no story. The story is emergent. So what Zamara is basically saying is, yes, the first day the first session, player characters come into your well written, well detailed mega dungeon. They decide to they bump up against the kobolds and troglodytes. Now, your second session, you need to keep notes on the status of the kobolds and troglodytes within this mega dungeon. Is there a love-hate relationship? How many are left? What is their motivation? Are they going to keep are they going to capture the PCs? Are they going to parlay? Are they going to run away? Are they going to team up? And these are details you need to write down for your next session. And of course, you have this discussion with your player characters. Hey, what are you going to do? The players are like, you know what? I think they're going to, they say out loud, I think they're going to team up against us. It's just 5 of us against 167 of them. Ooh, we're going to have to play them against each other. And one of them says, I'm going to use an illusion to shape change into a kobold. And another one's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And can I use a disguise and rub a troglodyte smell all over my body or something, right? TNS, what's going on there? Tired, need sleep, says, I'm late. Nah, you're early. You're perfectly fine. So what going back to what Zamara is saying is keeping notes of what's going on. And this gets multiply complicated when the players quote unquote descend into the dungeon and level 1 is affecting level 4. And it doesn't mean every time the players move, every single level's coming at them from the top and bottom, but it could be that way. Many monsters are going to say, screw this, I'm out. Like, they're not going to get involved at all. Others are just going to say, you know what, we're going to seal up the dungeon and leave them down there, right? What, they went to level 2? All the ones, the kobolds and troglodytes convinced the enemy on level 2, because they're on level 1, to say, seal it up, leave them down there, right? Oh, man. So, Mike Marin says, or do what I do and cheat and have the dungeon be chaotic or magic or lost in a time vortex so that you can ignore continuity. All right, let me bring up random encounters and because Magic did it. Okay. Now, mega dungeons are known for being in tier one. Tier one is like level 1 through 4 or level 1 through 5 ish. Level 1 through 4 in according to fifth edition is like tier one. That's, I'm going to air quote this, realistic fighting. This is where it's physicality. It is worrying about rations. It is, there's some magic, but magic hasn't dominated the world of the player characters yet. As they move into tier two, fifth through 10th level, more magical things will happen. Rooms will shift, time and space will bend around them. Player characters will have access to things like teleporting and flying and shrinking and growing and passing through walls and having extra senses that allow them to perceive for more parts of the dungeon. In which case, mega dungeons tend to shift the way the player characters do. So when they go through into tier two, a mega dungeon might have a magical forest of fungi on one level, and below that it might be a massive ocean, and below that level might be a hellscape, and below that level might be a Feywild or a dreamscape, and below that level might be a gigantic, almost near infinite maze, and below that level it starts to get more wild and magical. Now, at the bottom of your dungeon, there might be a reason why. It it goes into the world of realm of pandemonium. There's an evil entity that's causing rifts or something. There's uh, an ancient curse that changes time and space. There might be a wizard's cabal down there doing experiments, and it just so happens that the walls shift and move and turn Escher-esque, MC Escher-esque, or something like that. So yeah, M Squared does mention the fact that there are magical reasons why things work or don't work. Is there a section of your mega dungeon on level 8 that's anti-magic? Probably. Is there a magical statue trap that has tentacled eyes on it and is basically a beholder, but it's like made out of stone and it has eye stalks that just move like mechanically or something, but it acts like a real beholder? Of course, why not? Yeah. And random encounters, the reason for having random encounters, one of the hates of mega dungeons is it's just a bunch of random encounters once they get down there and blah blah blah. No, 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 no. Random encounters have a couple of reasons, but my favorite two are it's a tension timer. So those quote unquote empty rooms that player characters find, some of them might be rewards, which is a safe haven. When you're in the mega dungeons, many times you can't get out. So player characters need to barricade themselves in somewhere. They need a safe haven. Sometimes that safe haven is having to deal with the faction, like those troglodytes. Maybe the player characters are so powerful, the troglodytes are like, you go in that room, we're going to leave you alone. Just please move on. Don't kill us all, right? Maybe they find a concealed or secret door. Concealed doors might be concealed because something fell in front of it. Maybe there were monsters or NPCs down there that hid themselves and pulled like a Chester drawer in front or piled something in front of it. Maybe there was a door that's been covered over and locked because there's an evil monster inside of it. But whatever the case may be, player characters clear area out and they need a place to rest. So if they take too long, random monsters will start wandering around the dungeon. Now, it's not random. Usually wandering monsters are wandering because they're hungry, they're on patrol, they are patrolling their territory, they are looking for other enemies, not just PCs, but other enemies of themselves. Kobolds will be looking out for troglodytes, troglodytes looking out for kobolds, right? So the wandering monsters aren't wandering randomly in the sense of, I don't know what I'm doing here. No, they're listening for the sounds that player characters are making. They're sniffing something that's strange. They are going to gather mushrooms because that's what they do over a period of time. They are ensuring that all the traps are set up. They are making sure the doors don't stick. So they're putting oil on the doors and making sure, whatever. I don't know, whatever they're doing. Maybe they're digging more. They are making the dungeon out of a cavern system. They are doing something. uh, Zamar says, my favorite type of random encounter hinges on having 80 plus insert monster in a dungeon. They're taking patrols, resting in rooms, going for food, like DBJ is saying. Yeah, exactly. So, and mind you, a wandering monster isn't a wandering combat encounter. Okay, let me be clear on that. A wandering monster isn't necessarily a combat encounter. Let me give you an example. Maybe I'm trying to think of something very dangerous, but it's not a. Banshees are pretty terrible. Shadows are pretty terrible. For their CR level, they're dangerous ass creatures. So let's say banshees and shadows are going all around the dungeon. They're just random. I mean, you roll a d12 and they're number 6 through 12, right? They're all over, and every other monster is scared of these banshees and shadows. Well, what happens is those wandering monsters are A, going to put pressure on the player characters to stay in one place. B, wandering monsters are they themselves knowledge of the dungeon. So if the player characters are fighting troglodytes the whole time and they turn a corner and there's like 5 kobolds and those kobolds just bolt and the player characters try to run after the kobolds and they're small and they slip into a tight space and disappear, it tells them there's kobolds in the dungeon. It also tells them they're running. It may tell them that there's more of them. It may tell them, we don't hear anything. What's going on? And they hear a strange noise and the shadows start moving. And all of a sudden, the banshees start going around because they were slain in this place. And they're, and the PCs are like, oh, my ears are bleeding. Mother, father, sister, brother, this sucks, right? Random monsters give you clues as to what's going on, and it puts time pressure on the player characters. Most of the time, when player characters in Mega Dungeons make a lot of noise or take too long to move on somewhere or try to barricade themselves in, there's going to be something knocking at the door. So, what may happen is the player characters could time out the random monsters. Oh, wow, at our time at midnight, the banshees and shadows start moving around and all the other monsters start leaving. Maybe we need to get ourselves out of this area to let the shadows and banshees pass by, and then we'll move back again. It doesn't need to be a fight. Maybe there's a powerful demon or devil further down in the dungeon, and periodically it comes up from level 15 to level 5 or 6 to beat ass on its followers and then goes back down there. It may see the player characters snort at them, laugh, and go back where it came from. And the PCs, after, taking off their, lemonade and chocolate soiled pants and going like, was that a pit fiend that just passed us by? Was that a pit fiend that pointed at us and snorted or picked its nose and flicked a flaming booger at us and left, right? Yeah, that's a possibility. Also, this was an idea from a Knight's Talk. Said make a random encounter, and every time the players eliminate one of those threats, remove it off the random encounter list. So let's say there's 10 spots, and you have 1 through 10, or you have a D100 table, and it's like 1 to 10, 11 through 20, 21 through 30, etc. And there are kobolds on there, and the PCs placated the kobolds, killed them all, made a deal with them, did something, right? Then you move that off the list. Guess what? Now, when they start exploring and taking a long time to look for secret doors and blah, 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 now you roll, and guess what? 21 through 30 used to be kobolds. They're not there anymore. So that may be another incentive for the player characters to navigate their way through the dungeon. And it's not just random, it's your lore. Empty rooms, random encounters are your way, your excuse as a creator to dump lore on your players. Have the players hide and hear the hobgoblins who are talking about the war up above them between the kobolds and the troglodytes. And the hobgoblins are like, oh, the demon lord blah 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 is going to come on us if they start traveling, the troglodyte clans start traveling down here. And as they start, when they hear things and they see things and they smell things, the player characters go, oh, there was an ancient curse that made the shadows and the banshees navigate through here. Guess what? If we somehow excise this curse, we remove these damn banshees and shadows that keep coming up behind us, right? Or moving through the dungeon. And maybe Further down in the dungeon, someone's like, gives him a slow clap. Thank you so much for curing that curse. We love you, right? Zamara says I'm sorry, Tired Neat Sleeps says, at what point do adventurers in a dungeon inhabited by goblins become home invaders? Day one. Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty. I get it. Mega dungeons are basically like home invasions. You're kicking in the front door of monsters that are minding their own business and stealing their stuff and killing their kids. Yeah, it's pretty. Yes, that's very true. Zomar says, in the Hill Giants campaign for 2E, which I remember, there is a giant who's literally going to a room to pick up human shields to use as plates for a big party. It is a random encounter with no weapons. Yes, yes, random encounters. For some reason, we have the word encounter synonymous with combat. The two do not need to be, even if the hobgoblins are completely armed. When they hear about the legacy of the player characters, they go turn the corner, pikes forward, hobgoblins, you invader from above. PCs go, yes, we from above. Hobgoblins go, you pass, we pass. And they slowly walk past each other and keep on going. Because the hobgoblins are like, listen, the pit fiend, Zagalga Bloch told us to do this thing, and that's what we got to do. Player characters be damned. We were given an order. Our asses, what is it? John Wick 1. John Wick is like, why don't you go home to the bouncer? Bouncer's like, looks at him like, thank you, sir. Right? That's an encounter. That encounter could be hobgoblins. Tell us where your master is at. Hobgoblins go, we can't do that. We loyal. PCs start, doing the power up. Player characters go, we understand Dragon Ball Z. We tell you, right? That's the thing, and that's where the fun of the mega dungeon comes in. Lastly, I'll end it here. Yeah, I didn't see nothing. I don't see nothing at all. Right? Yeah, it was Baba Yaga, right? So the point of the mega dungeon, here's another thing that comes out with emergent storytelling, that Questing Beast brought this up in a video a little while ago, talking about the fourth pillar of play. And it's not exploration, it's not combat, it's not social encounter. It's gonzo, wild, fun, party, beer and pretzels, ridiculousness. Sometimes making the hobgoblins shit themselves is something you'll remember to the end of time. Sometimes the player characters going like, did we just make the hobgoblins, shadows, banshees, kobolds, and troglodytes all team up against us? We are capital F freedom, right? It's like it is the ridiculousness of the situation the players got themselves into that in and of itself tells a story, no matter how bad or good it turns out, that you'll always remember. And that may be just that may just be the emergent story itself. It is the tying the rope around the halfling and spinning them around and throwing them across the large pit. It is the wizard going, yeah, I ran out of spells. I'm just gonna light my spell book on fire, right? It's the paladin that jumps down the throat of the giant monster because they think it's gonna help. It's the rogue riding on the back of the giant monster going, come on guys, jump on, it's fun. It's all those weird things. That's funny. Oh man, Tamara's like, I ain't seen nothing. Nah, that ain't no bullet hole. I was born with that dripping out. Yeah. Wayne's like, thanks again, DBJ, for the fine thoughts, and maybe, just maybe, regular intel score. Yeah, exactly. Like, we ran out of rope. Quick, use the dwarf's beard. There's all kinds of strange, and two things, I'll say this about mega dungeons that people hate, because this just isn't in the sphere of role playing currently. And I say this as a baseline, not from you guys, because you guys are far too brilliant for this. There are two things. One is player character motivation. It is being motivated to move forward because that's what you want. It is being or becoming Indiana Jones. Why are you exploring the mega dungeon? Because it's there. Why climb the mountain? Why swim across the channel? Why learn how to skateboard? Why eat hot wings? Because they're there, right? The benefit of doing the thing is to do the thing. It is, we are going into the unknown and we don't know what's there and we want to find out more information. It is the epitome of, I'm making a character who wants to adventure. I'm leaving the farm. I'm not making a character. I'm not being a player who's folding their arms and waiting for the story to happen. It is, you know what? I want to go there to find out, to test my mettle, to bring goodness to the world, to find ancient knowledge. It's make a character that wants to go on an adventure. And why do you want to go on an adventure? Because it's there, right? For the game master or dungeon master side, why the mega dungeon? The mega dungeon is a sandbox. It is an enclosed sandbox. So in other words, instead of player characters just being able to wander the entire world, you do have an enclosed space. So that puts rails on the players. But it also is a space for players to make choices. And sometimes those choices don't fall into neat categories of what the rules say. When the players want to wedge open a door or find a plate that activates a trap or make a deal with a magical beast by giving it food and convincing it that we are its friend, or making those faction deals with monsters and players, or the hobgoblins are like, we're not going to let you go down into the lower depths by yourself. We're going to send an emissary with you. Or player characters coming up with, I'm going to cake myself in troglodyte stench or whatever. It's these things that don't have rules, but it requires rulings. It is the fun creativity that we as the dungeon master or game master are encouraging our players to engage in. When the players go, hey, I want to jump across the pit and have the skeleton army fall into the pit and get stuck in the pit after me, and then someone else pours oil down in the pit and lights them on fire, that you go, there's no rule for this, but sure as hell, that's a great idea. Let's do it, right? And it is embracing the chaos. When you roll a random encounter and something strange happens, or the player characters find a key, and when I say a key, it might be a door or a knob or knowledge or whatever, and using that to their advantage, when they circumnavigate a big bad to get around the Hydra that you thought would be a great encounter, and they go, nah, we're gonna go around it, and you go, slow clap, there you go, and they keep on going. Fine. When they learn that they can flood a part of the dungeon, whatever. When they learn that they can release the adamantine doors that allow lava to flood into the place, let them do it and embrace that fact. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. Zamar says, I random my encounter with a D4 start, and that dictates if the players run across a social encounter, okay, an immediate combat encounter, a puzzle encounter, or a trap. Oh, puzzles. Oh man. Not puzzles like a young boy and an old man and blah blah blah. No, no, no. A puzzle could be, there's a rickety rope bridge and you guys have a ton of heavy items on. How do you get across it? A puzzle might be, we need to get down in the water and swim 40 feet to come up on the other side, and we're heavily laden. A puzzle might just simply be, we have to crawl through the opening to get to the Kobold Warden in the first place. Who's going to go in head first? A puzzle is just a obstacle, a situation the players need to navigate without one answer to it. Maybe there's a portcullis that's dropped and there's keys on the other side. There's a key to unlock the door, but someone goes, I'm going to use Mage Hand. I'm going to shrink down as a rat, as a druid. I'm going to convince the kobold to hand me the keys or whatever, right? It's embracing that. So, um, Tired Need Sleep says, we're all going to give our players something a little extra after this. Yeah. Got to stick them a little bit. Give them lots of choices. Mega Dungeons, a lot of choices. This is why the old school fragile characters, TPKs, didn't really hurt our feelings anymore, because we had lots of choices And if we died because of our own stupidity by making the kobolds, troglodytes, shadows, banshees, and hobgoblins team up against us with a pit fiend coming from the other direction, that was our own damn fault. So we just went, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Lastly, I will say that mega dungeons. I will say that mega dungeons are. How do I say this? They are reusable. The purpose of the mega dungeon is that they are reusable. They should be the player characters in many narrative games are we need to kill the red dragon on the top of the mountain. So the player characters go to the bottom of the mountain, they go a couple levels, they get to the dragon, they kill the dragon, and they never return. They never go back through the mountain, they kill the red dragon, they somehow get on the eagle and fly home, and they never go back again. Mega dungeons are, by their design, a place for characters to navigate all the time. Player characters should be able to double back where they came from. Sometimes player characters will own part of the dungeon. Hey, that first level we cleared out, that's ours now. We live there. Literally. That's our place of operation. Many times those mega dungeons are places where the players can reset traps, invite or get rid of factions, use things that change the dungeon. If there's things that shut walls down, like Mike Marin said, M Square was mentioning that certain magical things happen in that dungeon. If the player characters can get behind that statue and move that beholder statue into the hallway instead of where it was in that room, that's what they do. If they make friends with the gargoyles that came alive from statues and attack them, and then we're just like, oh, well, if we leave the room, they turn back into statues, and we can just use them as to protect our backs because it attacks anything that comes through that room, sure. And so it's a place for players to use the sandbox and the pieces and go through the mega dungeon over and over again. Not a fear, but a thing that player characters may want to do is the 5-day work week. They get into a fight for 5-minute workday. They get into a fight for 5 minutes and they want to leave the dungeon, recoup and come back in the dungeon. Hey, does the dungeon reset itself? Maybe. Does it get worse? Maybe. Do they get reinforcements? Maybe. And that's the thing. So anyway, guys, thank you so much. I always go very long with you. Yeah, Zamora says, and visit the Discord to read about our best design encounter. Have a good day. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great one. I hope you can hear this music because I didn't hear anything. I'm gonna have so, guys, have a good one. See you later. Bye. Look at my funky face. Look at my funky face. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.